The briefing room buzzed with a restless kind of confidence, the kind that comes from people who have survived enough danger to believe they were untouchable. Flight suits creased with past missions, patches sewn on like trophies, helmets resting casually on the long steel table. When she walked in, the noise didn't stop, but it shifted. Laughter dipped, then returned sharper, edged with curiosity. She felt eyes move over her, measuring, dismissing. Someone leaned back in their chair and muttered something about support staff, loud enough to be heard but quiet enough to deny. Another pilot smirked openly, tapping his pen against the mission folder as if bored already. She took her seat without reacting, setting her gloves neatly beside her. The screen at the front lit up with satellite images of contested airspace, red markers pulsing like warning lights. She studied them closely, tracing routes in her mind, calculating fuel, speed, altitude, angles of approach. This wasn't new to her. What was familiar was the doubt. She had felt it in training rooms, simulators, and bases where her presence always seemed to need justification. The commander began speaking, his voice firm, outlining the threat. Enemy jets crossing the line, fast, modern, confident. Interception would be unavoidable. As roles were assigned, the room leaned forward. Lead, flank, strike, cover. Each name called carried weight, reputation. When her call sign finally came, it was attached to a secondary role. Escort, observe, hold position unless ordered otherwise. A few pilots exchanged knowing looks. One chuckled softly, shaking his head as if the outcome was already decided. She nodded once, acknowledging the assignment, though something tight settled in her chest. Not fear, but restraint. She understood politics. She understood trust had to be earned twice if you looked like her. The briefing ended, chairs scraping back, conversations igniting immediately. She caught fragments as she stood. Hope she can keep up. Just don't get in the way. Sky's no place for experiments. She slid on her helmet and walked out, the echo of boots on concrete following her toward the hangar. Outside, the jets waited, sleek and lethal under the open sky. Ground crews moved with practiced urgency, fueling, checking, saluting. When she climbed the ladder into her cockpit, the world narrowed. The canopy closed, sealing her into silence broken only by systems coming alive. Engines roared. The runway blurred beneath her as the jet surged forward, lifting cleanly into the air. Formation settled quickly, the other aircraft sharp and confident in their positions. She stayed where she was told, eyes scanning, instruments steady. The sky was wide, deceptively calm, clouds stretched like white scars across the blue. For a moment, everything matched the arrogance of the briefing, routine, controlled, predictable. Then the warning tone cut through the cockpit. Enemy contacts. Multiple. Fast. Her radar lit up, dots converging quicker than expected. Voices flooded the radio, overlapping reports, corrections, rising tension. The lead pilot adjusted course. Another called out a visual. She saw them too. Dark specks growing rapidly, sunlight flashing off wings. The enemy didn't hesitate. They split, attacking with precision, forcing the formation to scatter. One friendly jet veered hard, narrowly avoiding a missile. Another wasn't as lucky. A sharp cry over comms, then static, then smoke spiraling downward. Her grip tightened, breath controlled. Orders came through. Hold position, cover retreat. But as she maneuvered, she noticed something the others didn't. The enemy formation wasn't perfect. In their aggression, they'd opened a seam, a brief vulnerability where confidence turned sloppy. Her mind raced through options in seconds. Training, simulations, instincts honed in silence while others joked. She adjusted her heading slightly, just enough to test the gap. No one noticed. The radio was chaos now. She felt a strange calm settle over her, the same calm she'd always found at the edge of doubt. The sky ahead wasn't mocking anymore. It was inviting. The moment stretched thin, balanced between obedience and instinct, and then it snapped. Another missile streaked past her canopy, close enough to rattle the frame, close enough to make the decision for her. She pushed the throttle forward and rolled hard to the left, breaking from her assigned path. The G-forces pressed her into the seat as the world tilted, blue sky flipping into white cloud and back again. In her headset, voices erupted, someone calling her call sign, another shouting for status, but she didn't answer. Her focus narrowed to speed, altitude, and the enemy jets now filling her forward view. She climbed fast, knowing they would expect her to dive or retreat. The maneuver cost fuel, but it bought position. One enemy jet peeled away to engage a different target, exposing its tail for half a second longer than it should have. She didn't hesitate. Target lock confirmed. The missile left her wing in a clean, violent burst, cutting through the air with lethal certainty. A heartbeat later, the radar blip vanished. "Splash 1, she said calmly into the radio, her voice steady despite the pounding in her chest. Silence followed. Not disbelief yet, just confusion. There was no time to explain. Another enemy jet swung toward her, confident, aggressive, expecting an easy kill. She dropped altitude sharply, letting gravity do the work, then pulled up at the last possible moment, forcing the enemy to overshoot. The sky became a spinning canvas of contrails and flashes. She could feel every vibration, every warning tone, yet nothing distracted her. Years of being underestimated had trained her to act without applause, without backup. This was just another problem that required solving. She caught the second jet in a tight turn, predicting its escape path instead of chasing its current position. Her shot came from an angle that surprised even her, a calculated risk. The explosion bloomed briefly, orange against blue, then disappeared. 2. The radio came alive with shocked exclamations, someone asking for confirmation, someone else swearing under their breath. She acknowledged only with coordinates, already scanning for the next threat. The enemy pilots reacted now, breaking formation, trying to regroup. That hesitation was everything. She used it, weaving between altitudes, appearing and vanishing from their scopes. A third jet locked onto her, missile tone screaming in her ears. She deployed countermeasures, flares bursting like false suns, then rolled inverted, diving through her own decoys. The missile followed the heat and detonated harmlessly behind her. She came out of the dive directly behind her attacker. The shot was almost merciful in its speed. By now, the mockery from the briefing room felt like it belonged to another lifetime. The sky was her only reality. Sweat ran down her spine, but her hands were steady, movements precise. She checked fuel. Lower than she liked, but enough. Another enemy jet tried to flee, turning away from the fight. She anticipated the move, cut across its path, forcing it back into engagement. One clean maneuver, one decisive strike. 4. The remaining 2 enemy aircraft attempted a coordinated attack, desperation replacing confidence. They split wide, hoping to trap her between them. She recognized the tactic instantly. Instead of retreating, she flew directly toward the narrowing gap, timing her approach to the second. At the last second, she climbed sharply, firing upward. One jet vanished in a flash. The other broke too late. Her final missile found its mark as the sky around them fell eerily quiet. For a few seconds, there was nothing but the hum of her engine and the steady beep of instruments. Then the radio exploded, not with orders, but with disbelief. Calls for kill counts, requests for visual confirmation. Her call sign repeated again and again, no longer with doubt, but with something close to awe. She exhaled slowly, easing her jet into a controlled turn, scanning the empty airspace. The enemy was gone. In less than 20 minutes, the battle had ended. The return flight felt longer than the battle itself. Adrenaline faded, leaving behind a quiet heaviness as the sky stretched endlessly ahead. Below her, the land looked unchanged, indifferent to what had just happened above it. Smoke from distant wreckage thinned into faint scars that would soon disappear entirely. Her fuel warning blinked softly, reminding her that time and limits still existed. She adjusted her course and settled into formation with the others, noticing how much space they now gave her, how carefully they matched her speed. No one joked on the radio. No one questioned her position. As the runway came into view, clearance was granted without delay. One by one, the jets descended, tires screeching briefly against concrete before slowing. When her aircraft rolled to a stop and the engine powered down, the sudden silence rang in her ears. She sat still for a moment, hands resting on the controls, letting her breathing return to normal. Only then did she lift the canopy. Cool air rushed in, carrying the familiar smells of fuel and hot metal. The ground crew stared openly now, not bothering to hide it. Their salutes were sharper, more deliberate. She climbed down the ladder, boots hitting the tarmac with a dull thud. The commander was already approaching, his expression unreadable. Behind him, pilots gathered in a loose line, the same ones who had laughed in the briefing room hours earlier. No one spoke as she removed her helmet and tucked it under her arm. Her hair was damp with sweat, her face marked with the strain of combat, but her eyes were clear. The commander stopped in front of her and looked down at the tablet in his hands, scrolling through data, confirmations, timestamps. 6 enemy aircraft, he said finally, his voice steady but altered, as if recalibrating to a new reality. All neutralized within 20 minutes. He looked up at her then, really looked at her, not as a symbol or a risk, but as a pilot. Outstanding work. A murmur rippled through the group. One pilot stepped forward, the same one who had joked the loudest that morning. He hesitated, then nodded, a simple gesture heavy with meaning. "You saved us up there," he said. No sarcasm, no excuses, just truth. She acknowledged him with a brief nod in return, not needing more. Inside the debriefing room, the atmosphere had completely changed. The same screens replayed the mission, but now her maneuvers were paused, rewound, studied. Questions came fast. How she spotted the gap, how she timed the climb, how she managed fuel so tightly. She answered calmly, precisely, sharing what mattered, withholding nothing. This wasn't about proving them wrong anymore. It was about making sure the next mission went home with everyone alive. When the debrief ended, the room lingered in thoughtful silence. The commander cleared his throat. "From now on," he said, "we reassess roles based on performance, not assumptions." No one argued. Several heads nodded in agreement. She felt something shift. Not just in the room, but in herself. The weight she'd carried into that briefing, the need to justify her presence, loosened its grip. Later, as the base settled into routine, she walked alone toward the hangars. The sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the concrete, painting the jets in gold and amber. She paused beside her aircraft, resting a hand against its cool metal skin. She hadn't flown for recognition. She'd flown because the sky demanded skill, not permission. Because when everything else fell away, only capability mattered. Somewhere behind her, voices resumed, quieter now, more respectful. Her name traveled differently through the air. She put her helmet away, squared her shoulders, and headed inside, already thinking about the next flight. And if someone watching from afar felt inspired by her story, if they believed courage could rise even when doubt was loud, then this was just the beginning. For more powerful stories of strength and resilience, remember to subscribe to the channel Her Stories World, where voices like hers continue to soar.